For the people living across that ancient America, the end of the Ice Age did not arrive like a sudden storm. There was no single morning when the sky darkened and the oceans rushed inland all at once. The transformation came slowly, quietly enough at first that entire generations may have believed the land would always recover the way it once had before. And somewhere across those ancient landscapes, stories began forming, stories about water swallowing the earth. Stories passed from one generation to another as human beings struggled to understand what they were witnessing. Today, scientists studying ancient climate records, submerged landscapes, and glacial collapse believe these people were living through the final death of the Ice Age itself, a process that reshaped rivers, coastlines, ecosystems, and eventually the future of human civilization across North America. But even as the oceans continued rising and the glaciers kept collapsing into meltwater rivers, an even greater danger was building far to the north beyond the horizon, hidden behind enormous walls of ice. Then something happened that may have changed North America forever. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more prehistoric stories. If you could travel back far enough into the past, long before the first cities rose in North America, long before roads, borders, or names like California, Texas, or Florida ever existed, you would find yourself standing inside a version of America almost impossible to recognize today. The oceans sat hundreds of feet lower than they do now, pulling the coastlines far away from their modern edges and exposing enormous stretches of land that have completely vanished beneath the sea. The East Coast extended outward for miles upon miles beyond the shores Americans know today. Vast plains reached into the Atlantic where only dark water exists now, and ancient rivers carved through landscapes hidden beneath the ocean floor for thousands of years. Florida was not the narrow peninsula we see on maps today. It was immense, nearly doubled in size, stretching deep into what is now the Gulf of Mexico, covered with forests, open grasslands, and freshwater systems where animals gathered in enormous numbers. Along those ancient shores, generations of families lived entire lives, never knowing that one day their homeland would disappear forever beneath rising water. Far to the northwest, Alaska was not separated from Asia by the Bering Strait. A massive land bridge connected continents together, allowing people and animals to move across an enormous stretch of cold, open land between worlds. Herds of mammoths crossed frozen plains beneath grey skies, while giant bison thundered across grasslands that stretched farther than the eye could see. Predators stalked the forests, rivers ran wild and clear through valleys untouched by dams or concrete. America itself felt larger, older, and more untamed than the modern imagination can easily understand. Yet this was not some empty wilderness waiting to be discovered. Human beings already lived here. They built fires beside rivers now buried beneath the Atlantic Ocean. They hunted across coastal plains that no longer exist. Children were born beneath stars shining over lands now hidden under hundreds of feet of water. Entire communities moved with the seasons, carrying stories, traditions, and survival knowledge through generations as they adapted to a harsh but beautiful world shaped by ice, wind, and endless distance. At night, campfires flickered across ancient North America while smoke drifted into cold air, carrying the scent of pine forests and wet earth. Families gathered together beside those fires, listening to stories passed down from elders who understood the rhythms of the land better than anyone alive today. Hunters followed mammoth trails across enormous open plains. Others traveled along river systems larger and more powerful than the rivers Americans know now. Waterways swollen with glacial melt pouring southward from giant walls of ice that still covered much of the northern continent. Forests stretched across regions now underwater, filled with towering trees, strange birds, and animals that vanished from the earth thousands of years ago. And everywhere there was movement, human movement, animal movement, rivers changing course, temperatures slowly shifting, seasons becoming less predictable across generations. At first, the changes were small enough to ignore. Shorelines moved only slightly within a single lifetime. Rivers flooded farther than usual before retreating again. Hunting grounds shifted, winters softened. But over centuries, the transformation became impossible to deny. The people living along those ancient coasts may not have fully understood what was happening around them, but they would have seen the signs with their own eyes. Places where grandparents once hunted disappeared beneath shallow water. Forest edges drowned slowly year after year. Familiar paths vanished. Entire valleys became wetlands before sinking beneath the sea completely. The land itself was changing shape across North America, and no one could stop it. The oceans kept rising. The glaciers continued melting. And although these ancient communities adapted as best they could, moving inland and searching for new hunting grounds, the world they depended on was slowly being erased. What makes this story so haunting is that much of this forgotten America still exists today, hidden beneath the Atlantic Ocean, beneath the Gulf Coast, beneath waters where few people realize entire landscapes once stood beneath open skies. Scientists mapping the seafloor have discovered traces of drowned rivers, submerged forests, and ancient terrain that belonged to a lost version of the continent. A world that disappeared so long ago it almost feels impossible to imagine. But the world these people knew was already beginning to disappear. 10,000 years ago, if you stood where the Gulf of Mexico is today, you would not see water stretching toward the horizon. You would see an endless world of green plains, massive rivers cutting through the earth, forests swaying beneath cold winds, and smoke rising from distant human camps as families gathered beside fires under a sky untouched by cities, highways, or modern civilization. America looked nothing like it does now. The coastlines were farther out than anyone alive today could imagine. Florida was nearly twice its modern size. Huge valleys existed beneath places now hidden under dark ocean water. Herds of mammoths crossed open grasslands where fishing boats drift today, and generations of people built their lives on lands that no longer exist on any modern map. This was a real world, a living world, and for thousands of years it felt permanent. But slowly, almost quietly at first, the earth began to change. Far to the north, giant walls of ice that had covered enormous parts of the continent for ages started to weaken. Temperatures rose, rivers swelled, ancient shorelines began disappearing beneath rising seas year after year, generation after generation, until entire regions of North America were swallowed forever. Families who had once walked across vast coastal plains watched the ocean move closer every season. Hunting grounds vanished, rivers changed direction, forests disappeared beneath water. And somewhere in the middle of that transformation, human beings witnessed something so enormous, so terrifying, and so unforgettable that stories about a great flood survived for thousands of years across cultures and civilizations, long after the original world itself had disappeared. Today, most Americans have no idea this lost landscape ever existed beneath their feet. Few realize that enormous sections of ancient North America now rest beneath the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf Coast, hidden under hundreds of feet of water. But scientists searching beneath those waters have started uncovering clues that suggest the first Americans may have experienced one of the greatest environmental disasters in human history. Submerged forests, ancient river systems, drowned coastlines, possible traces of human life buried beneath the sea. And the deeper researchers look, the stranger the story becomes. Because this is no longer just a question about climate or rising oceans. It is a question about memory, about survival, about whether humanity has forgotten entire chapters of its own existence. Some researchers now believe ancient stories passed down for generations may contain echoes of real events witnessed at the end of the Ice Age, moments when entire communities watched the world they knew disappear beneath rising water. And if that is true, then the oldest memories in America may not be written in books or carved into stone. They may exist in stories carried across thousands of years by people determined not to let the memory of that world vanish completely. What destroyed this ancient America? How much land was truly lost? Could entire human settlements still remain hidden beneath the ocean floor today? And if our ancestors witnessed a catastrophe this massive once before, what does that mean for the future of the modern world now standing along those same vulnerable coastlines? Tonight, we journey back to a forgotten America buried beneath the sea. A place where rivers flowed across lands now underwater, where the first people of this continent watched their horizons slowly disappear, and where one of the greatest transformations in human history changed North America forever. And what scientists discovered beneath America's coastal waters may completely change how we understand the first people who lived here. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.